I'm not surprised at all that things are going slowly. That's sort of par for the course at the UN, and often a lot of the key activity takes place in the last hours of some of these negotiations. It's why it's so hard to track and so hard to effect, and why many deals are made at the end that surprise everybody, because it's done literally at the very last moment. So even though the pace has been slow and they're not near their conclusion, I still remain worried about what this final treaty might look like.
But when the U.S. had a chance to speak at the UN, they declined, and instead they handed out a statement, and in that statement it said that our Second Amendment, our right to self-defense, will in no way be handicapped. Handicapped? Is that a word you would have used to say hands off when it comes to our firearm freedoms?
No, absolutely not. Look, what they're trying to do is allow this to happen below the radar screen without people paying attention. So they're not going to get up on their soapbox to argue for the end result that they really want. They're going to allow it to come about by indirection and hope that the press are not watching, so that then they can take the treaty to the Senate without a record about what its implications would be for Second Amendment rights.
But when you look at the fact that nothing's moving, isn't that an indication that what this really is about is everybody in that room, from the tyrants to the human rights abusers to the rogue governments, they all have their own agenda?
Right. That's why the Obama administration's best strategy from their point of view is just keep a low profile. But, you know, even the statement that they distributed contains things that we ought to worry about. They say we don't want illicit weapons to fall into the hands of authoritarian regimes or terrorist groups or insurgent groups and so on, as if insurgent groups, freedom fighters in countries around the world, are the same as the authoritarian regimes that they're fighting against. I'll guarantee you the authoritarian regimes are going to get their weapons. But what the administration is looking for, as they have for 10 years, as the gun control groups have, is language that seems to be about international sales of weapons, but really has implications domestically. And it's not going to be visible language. It's not going to jump out at you. It's going to be language that does what they want by implication. And that's why these last-minute deals can be so dangerous.
John, there's nobody who knows better how the UN operates than you. But when you look at how it operates, what does it say about an administration who reversed policy and thinks the UN, we're talking about Obama, should have more say over what we do in this country?
I think it shows that in his first 3.5 years in office, he's tried to conceal his broader agenda. That's one of the reasons, I think, among many, I think this election in November is so important, because if Obama is reelected and he's freed from ever having to put himself before those pesky voters again, all of these instincts and priorities that we know he holds will come out. And the first cautious steps that you see in these negotiations over the arms trade treaty will accelerate very rapidly.
But isn't that the reason that every American, whether you own a gun or not, should be concerned? Because you're looking at an administration that thinks that this international authority, quote unquote, is the way he wants to get things done.
Right. For him, it's how he legitimizes his agenda when he knows he can't achieve it domestically. I'll give you another example. The administration has pushed very hard for the ratification of the Law of the Sea Treaty, a 30-year-old treaty that would effectively turn control of the natural resources under 2/3 of the world's surface over to UN agency. And they're very close to getting that ratified. We may have it stopped. But the point is, that is another very clear indication of where Obama wants to go, what direction he wants to take us in. And I think the arms trade treaty is part and parcel of that larger ideological approach.
The NRA's Wayne LaPierre was there saying putting something in the preamble is not enough. But can we really think that this administration is going to draw the line in the sand just like you did back in 2001?
Well, there's no way. We know their agenda is more intrusive federal gun control laws. That's what Fast and Furious was all about. It was an effort to prove the point the Mexican government has been trying to make, that it's lax American gun control laws that have spurred the growth of the drug cartels in Mexico. Now, that's ridiculous. The drug cartels in Mexico are getting their weapons from the Mexican police and the Mexican army. But the whole Fast and Furious thing started, I believe, as a way to prove the Obama administration's position on gun control. Now, it went disastrously wrong, and it shows a lot else that's wrong with Obama. But make no mistake, gun control's been at the top of their agenda. They've learned enough politically over the years not to make a frontal assault, so they're trying to do it by indirection.
Along with insisting that civilian ownership be in the treaty, they're also pushing for ammunition to be in the treaty. And again, you've got an administration in one breath saying ammunition should not be included. But in the next breath, they're saying, we're going to keep an open mind about any proposal. What does that say?
The administration's trying to have it both ways, saying we will not allow the Second Amendment rights of U.S. citizens, as you say, to be handicapped, but at the same time allowing the negotiation on the treaty itself to go forward. The basic premise of the Arms Trade Treaty is that the private ownership of firearms is dangerous. The United States doesn't need more restrictions on the export of weapons. Under our Arms Export Control Act, we've got a very sophisticated, very extensive system, something too extensive. So we don't need this treaty, and I tell you, other governments like Russia may sign the Arms Trade Treaty, but they're not going to pay any attention to it. So you look through all this and you say, what is the purpose of this exercise from the Obama administration's point of view? There's only one explanation over time that makes sense, and that is they're trying to lay a predicate in this treaty for further effort at domestic gun control.
So come August 1st, let's say they sign and approve this treaty. What will we see? What can we expect?
Well, I think the treaty will have language in it that will be ambiguous, capable of multiple interpretations. It will come to the Senate, John Kerry, who's desperately trying to find a treaty that the Senate can ratify. In the lame duck session of Congress, we'll try and push it through. We'll hear assertions by the administration that no Second Amendment problems are involved. But I tell you, the minute that treaty is ratified, the gun control groups will find language in it and say, but look, we've agreed to this. This means we must do the following things in domestic gun control, and we will be in exactly the problem area that we've identified for the last 10 years.
You mentioned the importance of the November election. So what does it mean if Obama gets 4 more years when it comes to our individual freedoms and our sovereignty?
Well, I think in case after case, we've seen what the inclination of the Obama administration is. We've seen what they would like to do if they thought they could get away with it. And it is reduction of individual liberty here at home. That's what health care is all about. And the ceding of American sovereignty on key issues across the full spectrum of national security and even domestic issues as well. So I don't think you can underestimate the flexibility that Obama will have if he gets a second term, and even more if he gets control of the House and the Senate again, to pursue the agenda he was too cautious to pursue in the first term.
Have you yourself, all the years you've been doing what you've been doing, have you ever been concerned, so concerned, about where this country is headed and the image that it has, the lack of respect, I would, from international arenas?
I think this is the most important election we've had since the end of World War II in this country, and I think the rest of the world is watching it almost as closely as we are. Our allies are dismayed by the performance of the Obama administration. Our adversaries are encouraged, and they want to see what kind of America emerges from this election. And we really have as stark a choice in the national security and international arena as we do on domestic policy. You cannot underestimate the importance of November the 6th.
Does a treaty trump our Constitution? And how does that work, John?
No, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, but a treaty, especially like the one being negotiated in New York, would be self-executing, meaning it would have the force of law in the United States. Now, we could, in effect, repeal the treaty later, but I tell you, once it's in place, it's very hard to get these treaties reversed. I've been through this process myself of withdrawing from treaties. It's very hard to do. So it's critical, I think, if they sign an arms trade treaty, that it be defeated in the Senate if the administration brings it up. A new Romney administration, I hope, would unsign the treaty and be done with it. So I think it's going to be very important to keep this effort up. I think things have gone well from our perspective, but it is far from over.
So your message to Americans?
Defend your rights.